a lot of stuff has obviously happened in the world the last couple of years. Has anything that's gone on made you change your commitment to basketball at all, minimize the importance of it?
It's just a separation between what's going on here, when I'm playing professionally and what's going on out in the world. And if you don't create that distinction, then it's easy to feel the weight of the world while you're going out there and playing.
Hey, Kyrie, just wanted to ask, on a mental, maybe spiritual, emotional, even physical front, is everything okay with you?
Before we start this video, I want to acknowledge that what Kyrie Irving has done is definitely wrong. He shirked his responsibilities as a multimillionaire playing a basketball game in order to go do things that aren't conducive to the team. Basically things that look like they've been hurting the team. I mean, in what other employment setting could you take a week or two off without telling your employers basically anything that's going on and leaving your fellow employees out to dry? Up to that degree, I do disagree with Kyrie Irving's decisions, but I feel like he hasn't been able to get some slack ever since he's made those rather unfortunate comments on the flat earth.
What is that?
Persuaded by Kyrie, here are some recent photos of the earth from our friends at the internet.
It seems that ever since then, he made that stupid statement and decided, he rolled back on it later on. He's like said, he's in a learning process or whatever. People haven't been able to take him seriously. Whether it's from the antics in Boston or in Cleveland, or even the things that he's done in Brooklyn, it just seems that he's always had this title of a troublemaker or a disruptor, or someone who doesn't want to play the game of basketball. When all of these things are most definitely false. Just because he has a different personality than a lot of other players in the NBA and, a lot of people in the world, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong with him. But it's always been treated ever since he made that one easy knock out the park comment. Oh, he always talks about flat earth. What does he know? It always seems that Kyrie Irving is the villain. And I've never really seen a mainstream defense for anything that Kyrie does. When in actuality, he does things that are amazing that most people would be in awe of if it was some other person. For example, he gave hundreds of thousands of meals to starving children in New York during, of course, the lockdown and the pandemic. He donated $1.5 million in unemployment funds for WNBA players who wanted to go and protest instead of play the game. He even orchestrated a discussion/documentary on the killing of Breonna Taylor, and many other things that I'm sure haven't been released to the public, or at least the national public. Kyrie Irving's a good guy. It's just that he's never made out to be so. If you look at it from the perspective of Kyrie, what he did was not necessarily in the wrong. In fact, it was rather understandable. And now, I know that this is a heated topic and something that could be controversial, but I hope that you'll listen to this video to sort of try and understand what Kyrie's actions were and not try and look at it through the lens that the media and all of them have been giving. You don't have to agree by the end of the video, that's perfectly fine, but just let me know in the comments below what you think after this. Okay, so on January 6, 2021, the United States Capitol was breached by a mob of Trump protesters. It caused shockwaves around the nation and particularly in the NBA as well, as many of the players that had been involved with the social justice movement of the summer made comments on the state of the United States, to the point where even the Milwaukee Bucks and Detroit Pistons took it to where they would kneel on the court. If you didn't know, Kyrie Irving is a vigorous proponent of social justice movements. He was the leader of the no play faction way back in the summer of 2020 when they were deciding whether or not the NBA would play, and listed as one of his major reasons not to play was so that the NBA Brotherhood could spend more time on advocating for social justice. And he's had a long track record of that. So I'd imagine when he saw the things that went on Capitol Hill and the fact that the Kenosha police officer who shot Jacob Blake was also let off, I'd imagine that these things took a toll on Kyrie and basically made it so where he had to sit out the next day. Now, there are a lot of people when Kyrie Irving took the day off imagine that he did it for mental health reasons, which I believe is something that is very valid. The NBA this year, while not as tough as the 2020 bubble, is definitely socially isolating and could possibly be very disparaging to someone's psyche. I mean, imagine, you can't go out beyond your very close friends and family, and you can't really do much except stay within your house. It's gotten to the point already where multiple NBA players have said they don't want to play this season because of the restrictions that surround it. So that compounded with the fact that Kyrie has been rehabbing from a 10+ month injury and not playing in the bubble regardless and doing all of these things for the social justice movement, you could imagine that resulted in him needing to take a day off. When he took the day off, initially those were my thoughts, that that's what he was going to do. And I wouldn't be surprised if he would say something along those lines when he comes back. As for him taking off more games after that, now that was a point of contention for a lot of people. There was an opposing NBA agent that explicitly said that taking off one game was basically unacceptable, whereas taking off multiple was flat out atrocious, which makes sense if you look at it through that lens. But through Kyrie's lens, basketball necessarily isn't his priority. Now, that sounds horrible to say, but through Kyrie's eyes, I'd imagine it's really not all that. As you guys know, the week after January 6th came both Kyrie's father's and sister's birthdays, one of which he was caught celebrating at some club in New Jersey. Now again, that's something that really isn't justifiable. He was maskless, there wasn't really much communication with the team organization, I'd imagine, on that part, and also it forfeited him money and games because he broke the protocol of the league. But Kyrie's addressed these type of issues before. Roughly a year ago now, when his grandfather died, he held a post-conference after there'd be some issues in the media and with a team and whatnot, and he basically laid it all out there.
I went to my grandfather's memorial and he passed on October 23rd, and after he passed, basketball was the last thing on my mind. So a lot of basketball and the joy I had from it was sucked away from me, and there was a facial expression that I carried around with me throughout the year. Didn't allow anyone to get close to me in that instance, and it really bothered me. So throughout the year, it started becoming more and more clear that my relationships within my home life have way higher precedent than the organization or anyone, and I barely got a chance to talk to my grandfather before he passed from playing basketball. So you tell me if you would want to go to work every single day knowing that you just lost somebody close to you, doing a job every single day that everyone from the outside or anyone internally is protecting you for.
Now, I don't necessarily know what it was going through his mind at that point when he was at the party, but it's his sister's, one of his best friend's birthday parties. There was no way that he was gonna miss it for anything. And with him, he just didn't care what the optics were gonna be about. He'd probably figured that his sister's friends were all responsible enough to make sure that they were COVID negative and had gotten tested before and all of that. But of course, that still doesn't excuse it. But Kyrie knew the repercussions of what he was gonna do, and he did it anyway. And in the process, sure, he might have lost $866,000, but hasn't he made enough money already? Then there'd been the picture of him caught in the Zoom call roughly 30 minutes before the Nets took on the Denver Nuggets, where he was volunteering for Manhattan District Attorney candidate Tahani Abushi. Now, again, going back to the priorities thing, Kyrie has said multiple times that he doesn't necessarily think that basketball is the ultimate end-all be-all, and Tahani Abushi's campaign and him volunteering for it fits in that schema. The short and long about her is that she's the first non-white male that's running for Manhattan District Attorney. And the District Attorney is the person who basically decides who's going to be jailed and who's going to be not in the community. Tahani Abushi is trying to fix that, and clearly that fits into what Kyrie Irving wants to do. Think about it from his perspective. Would you rather play a relatively meaningless game against the Denver Nuggets, or would you want to continue to try and contribute for a woman that wants to make change in your community? And given that he is a celebrity professional athlete, he has a lot more weight than the average volunteer would. Kyrie Irving is just such a curious case because he's so darn good at the game of basketball, yet at the same time, he's found other purposes that he's almost more motivated to. Now, that doesn't mean that he isn't passionate for the game of basketball. I wholeheartedly disagree with that sentiment. I'd imagine he still wants to be a world champion just like almost any other NBA player in the league. But at the same time, he has a dual purpose where he feels he has to do other things on top of that. Like, sure, he is getting paid millions of dollars to play in the NBA, but imagine, he had to get that good in order to be paid millions of dollars to play a game. The amount of hours, the amount of dedication, the amount of sweat, the amount of blood and tears that he put into the game outnumbers almost every single person in the world, and nearly almost certainly everyone that's criticized him thus far. For example, who's putting more work in basketball, Stephen A. Smith or Kyrie Irving? And saying that he doesn't prioritize basketball, that's something that's almost sort of disrespectful if you look at the amount of time that Kyrie Irving's put into the game and what he's done for the game even already. Now, is this behavior beneficial for the Brooklyn Nets at all? That's one of the things that I do have gripes with. And apparently it seems that it might be. When Kyrie had a similar situation to this roughly a year ago, Kevin Durant was quoted as saying that Kyrie's an artist. You have to sort of leave him alone sometimes. He's been notorious to do that in almost every single team that he's been on, because he sort of operates differently than a lot of other people.
Man, I'm dead.
The best way to put it is that he's an eccentric genius. Whatever he produces is going to be amazing, but the things that come along with it, the way that his thought pattern works, isn't the thing you would traditionally want as a star player. You could imagine that going AWOL for almost 2 weeks would be a huge dent in any team's chemistry, and I'd imagine that there are patches that he needs to fix up. But KD did say that thing long ago, and he even said now.
I won't speak on Kyrie. I'll let him do that for himself. We support him 100%. And pray for the best.
There might be something deeper going on than just the things I'm talking about. We're not necessarily sure, but I don't think that it's going to be that detrimental to the Brooklyn Nets. James Harden himself, after the game ended, the newest addition to the team and what you would think logically would be the least in the loop and the most mad at what Kyrie Irving is doing, had nothing but positive words to say about him. Kyrie Irving is definitely someone who doesn't prioritize the game of basketball nearly as much as someone of his caliber traditionally does. Is that a bad thing? At least for this situation, I don't really think so. He missed, 7 regular season games, of which the Nets were 5-2 in. It was at the beginning of the season and before they even acquired James Harden, so there wasn't necessarily anything that they needed chemistry-wise. He went out and celebrated his sister's birthday party and his father's as well, of which we didn't see any pictures about, things that he holds very near and dear to him after his grandfather had passed. He went ahead and advocated for social justice in his community, trying to make an impact in the time that he was not playing the game. These are all things that basketball coaches and minds and all of those would traditionally look down upon because it doesn't help you win. I think that Kyrie Irving is looking a little bit past that. Whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing, we'll find out come July. Thanks for watching. The last time that Kyrie took off a game was when Kobe tragically passed. The game that we saw afterwards was one of the most brilliant performances that he'd ever put on in his life. Kobe Bryant was a large mentor of him, and I'd imagine a huge influence to the things that he's doing even now. As ironic as that seems, Kobe's spirit lives in Kyrie Irving. But with that being said, I have now presented the defense for Kyrie Irving. Take of it what you will. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll see y'all later. Thanks for watching.